Moving on now to Apple. Their new version, iOS, the operating system that they provide on tablets and especially, most importantly, on iPhones, version 14.5. It was announced in May of last year that Apple was making this move. And it didn't have much of an impact that we were aware of or that we observed through last year. We took steps. There's a thing called the Facebook, Instagram, again, has been the primary, most effective outreach vehicle to bring in investors to these raises. And they had a thing called the conversion API, which was pretty much useless and in heavy neglect mode. But they decided to change it, upgrade it, and provide server level tracking, because on the iPhone device itself, iOS 14.5 makes it very easy. In fact, blocks tracking of activities for users in the main. So I'll step back for a minute here. The default setting when anyone buys a new Apple device that runs iOS 14.5, which is every new tablet and every new iOS phone, the default setting is privacy mode. So if a potential investor, if a user of an Apple device wants to be tracked, which most people aren't really excited to do, if they do want to be tracked, they have to find the place in the operating system on their device and change the setting, because the default setting is off, high privacy mode. So as you can imagine, as people upgrade to the latest version of the operating system and as they buy new devices, this has had a seriously big impact on the effectiveness of marketing online to Apple device users. And more important, and as important, is the fact that most of the investing activity on mobile devices comes from Apple users. They have generally they're wealthier and they have a higher propensity to invest. So this is seriously big news. This to me eclipses the stock market fluctuations and the Ukraine war. Those are sideshows, in my opinion. The biggest issue we're dealing with as an industry in raising money is developing new ways to find effective outreach mechanisms that will work anyway, even though Apple is making life so much more difficult. You know, if you were watching this, you'll have seen announcements from the various online social media platforms that make a lot of money from advertising revenue, like Facebook and Snapchat and others, where their revenues and profits have been really hammered, and they're using various excuses like the Ukraine war and the stock market and things, which I think are literally a distraction. The primary issue is that Apple has made it very hard to track people's activity. And really when you look back strategically at what's been going on, starting in the late 2000s, there was really a free-for-all. There was a free-for-all where a lot of things were taking place that I observed that weren't allowed or shouldn't have been allowed, where players like Google and Apple and Facebook, Instagram, and others were sharing and helping each other to scale up and looking at each other as non-competitors, which at that point was more the case. These days, they're more lining up to compete with each other. But in any case, that was a sort of a free-for-all period. You know, if you think about 2010 through 2021, really to the end of 2021, it's been an amazing, wonderful period where lots of tracking has been by default allowed. And that's made for a lot of effective marketing. So we are going to see a lot of small companies failing that were able to make money and customer acquisition was affordable in the past, which is no longer affordable. And we're also going to see a lot of online raises that used to be viable become non-viable. This is huge. To me, this is our single biggest priority as the company we are in the fundraising business. So we've become more selective. This isn't brand new. This is something we've been doing for some time, but becoming more selective because of the changes. And now I'll switch back to what the context has felt like. So we jumped on board with the Facebook, Instagram conversion API upgrades. They weren't documenting it properly. They weren't describing it fully. So we were at the leading edge of figuring that stuff out, making intelligent assumptions about what they were doing when they weren't documenting it adequately. So we got the conversion API working very early, and it helped, but we didn't see a really desperate need for it last year. But what we've seen is starting this year in January, we've seen a significant reduction in the efficiency of advertising outreach through Facebook, Instagram. And if that wouldn't be such a problem if there was a number two player that was really close, but there isn't, right? So TikTok is the only game in town that might end up outstripping Facebook and Instagram's efficiency. I imagine a lot of you are thinking that that TikTok is for kids. Certainly it started out that way, but their targeting algorithms are astoundingly good. And so we've been encouraging our clients to use TikTok, and our agencies, the clients that are, the agencies that our clients use to use TikTok and leverage it. And it's early days, but we are having some very promising results from doing so. It's different, it's more inconvenient because it's different, but the growth rate of TikTok is astoundingly fast, largely because their targeting algorithms are incredibly good. And of course, targeting algorithms being incredibly good is key to showing ads to the right people, because that is what has made Facebook, Instagram so successful, is that they know so much about their users that they don't publish on the page, but they know in depth so much. They know more about me than I know about myself, and they can be objective in analyzing it too, right? Which I certainly don't have the ability to do. So my point is that TikTok is the only potential that I see as a social media platform that might equal or exceed Facebook, Instagram's efficiency, but there isn't a number two player that's close. Google is the closest, and they're too far away from an efficiency standpoint, and their efficiency has been impacted by these Apple iOS changes too. So they're less efficient than they used to be. So this is a very, very important shift. And you'll see, as I said, it's already evident to me, and it'll become more evident that it's more difficult to raise money now. It's more difficult to market anything when doing so entails targeting users through Apple devices, particularly the iPhone and the tablet. So what are we doing about that, and what else is going on? Let me get into that. We're attempting to lead and succeeding in some respects to lead a better feedback mechanism to the advertising platform. So if you imagine when Facebook is running an ad for a client company, they used to be able to track the arrival of that user on the offering page, and we would feed back to them what the investment engagement level was through the tracking pixel. And that enabled Facebook's AI software to determine how to find other people like that engage successfully in the investment process. Now the blinders are on. They're like this, they're driving blind. They can't see what the activity of the investor is when they arrive. They know who they sent, they know when they sent them, they know who they were, they know all about them, but they do not know what they did, because the tracking pixel is disabled when an iOS 14.5 device is in play and the setting is in privacy mode, which is the default setting, right? So this is huge. So what we're doing is we're already grabbing all of the available information in the back end as to what successfully occurs, and we're sending as much information as the platform, Facebook, Instagram in this example, is willing to accept. So we're sending them every detail, like to the extent they're ready to accept it. They're not ready to accept all of it yet, but they're getting there, because this is essential, right? You can imagine they know they sent somebody, they know when they arrived, they don't know what transpired. We know when they arrived, and we have ways of, we can track exactly what they did. So by feeding back that information with great detail to Facebook, Instagram, that becomes an essential and very effective method of increasing efficiency. So they again are able to know which ad with which person was effective, so they can find more people like that, right? So you'll see a big shift towards doing that, where essentially it takes a lot of effort in the funding platform to go above and beyond and grasp all this information, and it mitigates against using generic solutions where you can't do that level of tracking, right? It has to be done in I refer to us as a boutique because we aren't all about volume. We're about success. Fantastic companies that that the investors will be celebrating that they invested in years to come. That's what we're about. Not about pure volume. We're about long-term success. So we're prepared to jump through all the hoops that are necessary to maximize efficiency. So pardon me for getting into promote my company mode, but it's a very important fact. Okay. Yes. Yes. So another big trend we're seeing as a direct result of this is is other ways to effectively reach audiences. So one of those is podcasts. Companies, I encourage you to participate at least in podcasts, but actually generating your own podcast audience is a great way to go. We're in discussions with a company in the biotech space that has 500,000 attendance level for their biotech podcast. This is a really valuable asset when it comes to raising money, of course. Right. So podcasts are one. YouTube is another one, building a big audience on YouTube. Any place that you can build a large following that you have clout and influence and an engaged audience with becomes so much more important in the current context than it used to be. TikTok is a great example of that. What's happening with TikTok is it's getting more and more mature, more sophisticated gradually as it grows very rapidly. And it's going to get more and more difficult to become an influencer. It's going to get more and more difficult to build a giant audience on TikTok. So I encourage you, if you're going to get yourself involved with TikTok, that you do so sooner rather than later. And another thing we're seeing is a trend towards leveraging owners of content sites, right? So one of the companies, these aren't marketing agencies per se, these are entities that own a lot of content where the content is relevant, where the content sites are relevant, then we can cause our client companies to be promoted to those content sites in a way that is independent of and not needing iOS 14.5 pixel tracking. So in some respects, it's a bit like a sledgehammer, but it's very cost effective. So we're getting tremendous results from doing that. And this isn't really, this is a complementary service that the agency and our clients use, the marketing agency and our clients use, and that we help leverage, where they own content sites which are relevant to the investing process. And by using them, we can amplify the marketing efforts of our client companies and reduce the cost of marketing them. Hugely important. And similarly, we're working with one of our client companies where they are now in a relationship with a company that has over 10 million investor members and pretty good knowledge about those investor members' preferences. And in return for equity in the company that's making the offering, the owner of the relationship with those investors is responsible now for all of the marketing outreach to their members to raise the money. There's no guarantee that they'll succeed, of course, because you can't guarantee that kind of thing. But in return for an equity position in the company, they're going to bat in order to raise money cost effectively because they have a giant member base that they have a good relationship with and they can leverage, and they have done some successful raises in that way before. These are things that matter so much more today. Email lists in some cases will be useful. We've had so much experience of email lists turning out to be utterly useless when rented or purchased. There will be exceptions. We've come across a couple recently, but you have to be exceptionally selective when you're using email lists. But the point I'm making here is that there is an adaptation process underway in order to deal with the challenge that iOS 14.5 presents us. It's a lot of change. The status quo is no longer adequate. We've had it easy for 10 or 12, 14 years, and now things are getting much more difficult, which is where the professionals come in and have to add value, which is, of course, what we do. Another trend that's underway, which we'll see more effect from, is AI machine learning in better targeting. That's what Facebook, Instagram already does. That's what TikTok already does. But you'll see that popping up in other places. We have an initiative ourselves to use AI machine learning to identify which individual investors will have a much higher propensity to invest in a particular company. Hugely important.